Right. I want to talk about 5 Excel developer categories. In other words, categorizations of developers who use Excel Visual Basic primarily as a means of automating Microsoft Excel. Now, there's a mind map. It's kind of a map. It's a vertically arranged map that contains items labeled from 1 to 5, the 5 different categorizations of Excel developers, and the categorizations are done based on the descriptions provided in the Excel VB Programming Bible, written by Bullen, Bovey and John Green. Professional Excel Development, that's what it's called. It's a very big book. I bought, my brother-in-law Shegun helped me to purchase it way back, I think in 2006, from Amazon.com. Since then they've had, I think, 1 or 2 new editions, but that book enabled me to really take my work to the next level. I began to use all sorts of advanced stuff. So the categorizations are important for the kind of coaching solutions I offer, because people who want to learn, I need to be able to first of all decide where they are at so as to know what they will need. So I'm describing it now because I want you to be able to listen to this and use it to kind of do a self-assessment, so you know exactly where you are and what you can aspire towards, at least in my own estimation. So the first one, the first level of developer is just the basic user, the Excel user, just the average Excel user generally, but not a complete novice. So these kind of people see Excel as a tool for their work, but they may not see themselves as developers. They use Excel to create lists and to carry out repetitive calculations, but they tend to be very informal about the way they do it. There's exactly no structure or anything like that. It's not like they're incompetent. It's just that they don't really have the time and the training to do anything in a very well articulated way that enables one to develop something that could be called an application. So they are very basic users of Excel, but not novices. So this group of people, the kind of coaching I offer them will enable them overcome or avoid common mistakes that they make, especially with regards to best practice design and layout of worksheets for data entry. What do I mean by best practice design and layout of worksheets for data entry? For instance, there is a standing rule in Excel reporting, spreadsheet reporting generally. You do not put your data entry worksheets in the same worksheet as, or data entry tables, you don't put them in the same worksheet as your report worksheets, the one that contains formulas. So if you have anything that contains formulas, which will be the output from your data entry, you would put those in a different worksheet separate from the place where you make your entries, and you would structure the data entry table in a way that allows you to preferably, ideally, make your entries in one screen or like in multiple screens, where you just scroll down and you make entries to another screen of tables or rows, and everything else that needs to be generated in terms of reports will appear in the other spreadsheet that has the formulas. So that's an example of best practice design and layout. There are other things, color coding and all of that you could do. Spaces on the left and on the columns, and on the rows there will be spaces you will leave. We call them programming rows and columns, that you leave for the use in automating the spreadsheet and the workbook itself. So I'll leave it at that for now. So the second group of Excel developers, they are referred to the Excel power users. Now this group of people are typically very proficient in the use of Excel functions. All the advanced functions you use in the spreadsheets, they are very good at that. They are able to create complex spreadsheets. Typically in the workplace, their colleagues call on them, their co-workers call on them to help to develop solutions. They'll create workbook for others to use, things like that. They may take code they find online, and with a little know-how, they would actually be able to create like clumsy adaptations, clumsy modifications of those code to solve problems in the workplace. So this kind of people, the coaching I offer will help them to improve not just their Excel skills, but also their VBA coding skills. And I must emphasize here, quite often there are a lot of things you can do in the Excel work interface that you don't even need to use any code for at all. Before you settle for the option of incorporating VBA code into whatever you're doing in Excel, there are a lot of other things you can do within the workbook interface the spreadsheet engine that are some kinds of automation, but you do not need to use code. So there's a lot you can learn about how to automate Excel before you even have to employ code itself. But the objective here will be to help a power user migrate from not just using advanced functions in Excel, but also adopting some or developing some VBA coding skills as well. Right, the third category of developers are called VBA developers. This is an interesting group of people. The stuff I did with the case study I shared the PDF to yesterday, based on a blog post I did in 2016. From this Indian chap, Praveen, who kept contacting me asking for help, and he's one of the examples of code he sent me which he needed help with. I had to tell him in the video I created that it looked like the code was written by a VBA developer. So these are often VBA developers are often people who are power users, but they started VBA too early. In other words, before they could even master the use of the Excel engine, the Excel report generation interface, they had already delved into coding with Visual Basic for application. Typically this kind of people are people that even switched from using the actual VB6 platform. So Visual Basic 6, the actual coding platform, the native coding language that a lot of people know from way back. Then when VBA came, it's a kind of offshoot of VB. So people who are good at VB could come into VBA coding, but the thing is, many of them will come in with their own abstract use of VB, and they will not take pains to study the object model of the application they were using. For instance, Excel, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, each of which can lend itself to automation using VBA. So many of them, therefore, because of this wrong orientation, they assume that every problem needs a VBA solution. As a result, they tend to write code for things that don't need coding. Like we say in the Excel VB world, let Excel be Excel. Sometimes Excel can already do that thing in the spreadsheet. There's already automation for it in form of advanced custom functions in the spreadsheet that you can create. But these guys will now come and try to use code to do the same thing that Excel could do itself with some functions that are already inbuilt into Excel. So what ends up happening is that they create cumbersome, slow solutions that make poor use of the Excel object model, and so they end up reinventing the wheel. Ultimately, it doesn't even serve the client because the solution doesn't exactly flow. It doesn't work well because it's slow, tedious to use, and things like that. So this group of people, if I were to offer coaching, the objective would be to teach them, first of all, best practice worksheet design. That's crucial. It's a foundation, because it's only when you understand the best practice way to set up your worksheet that you will understand how to bring in automation. It's not just random insertion of coding and all of that into the spreadsheet interface. So they'll need to also learn Excel features for data entry, things like validation and all that without using code. There's provision for that in the Excel spreadsheet interface. Data analysis and presentation, advanced coding techniques, that now relates to VBA itself. VBA best practice, improving coding performance and things like that. So even if they write slow code, we're going to look at how they can improve the code, how they're going to eliminate redundant lines in the code. There are a lot of things that if you were to use macro programming, for instance, or use the macro recorder, you just get a default generic lines of code. But with knowledge and understanding of how to streamline your code sentences, you can actually make your code run faster and more efficiently. All right, so that's another one. Right, the fourth level of developers are called Excel developers. Now, unlike power users, these ones make smart use of the Excel engine. They incorporate VBA where it's needed. They understand how to do that, so they don't go about just bringing automation where it's not, bringing the coding where it's not necessary, and they are actually comfortable developing applications for use by their colleagues or in teams. But they tend to be reluctant to use other languages. For instance, this is because the objective is whatever is going to help the client to get the result they want is what you should do. It's not that you just be a kind of puritanical user of Excel VB exclusively. So they don't understand that they can use other languages to improve the performance of their Excel solutions. So the service I offer, the support I offer, will be to help them learn how to move up to professional Excel developer level in their work, which I'll explain. For instance, as an example, would be to connect to databases. I remember there was a hotel job I did where I had to make the Excel application communicate with it's just a simplistic application, but to communicate with an Microsoft Access database. But you could go as far as making a communicate with an Oracle database and things like that. It all depends on the scale and if the client can afford it. So I remember that time the hotel wanted that, and it was interesting because when I was to do it, they didn't even believe I could do it. So they had this key solution, this room key solution, and they wanted me to tap into that to pick out the customer names, and we were able to do that successfully. Unfortunately, we couldn't progress further because they were not ready to pay me what I asked them to pay me. So the demo I did was where we stopped. All right, the fifth level, the final level, professional Excel developer. These are people that build fast, easy to use and maintain and also secure applications. We call them there's a particular breed of applications they create that are called dictator applications that completely control the user interface graphically. Those of you that have seen my applications, the ones that actually use all the Windows API calls and all that, you see how I take complete control of the visual interface to the extent that you might not even recognize that Excel at all. Probably only maybe you see the icon in the top left, and the rest of the interface I create custom GUIs. The Excel forms are key features in these apps, and so some of you would have seen my floating forms that make it unnecessary for you to interact directly with the spreadsheet, because you make your entries into the form, and the forms have inbuilt validation for data entry, so you can't make mistakes posting text into a field that requires numeric data. And so the application makes its entries, jumps hundreds of rows, hides rows, unhides rows and all that, generates reports on the fly, and so you find that it kind of literally eliminates the need for you to be conversant with the use of Excel conventionally as a generic user, because the interface is just visual, it's just intuitive. And so we use Windows API calls, VB.NET, XML, and of course the ability to connect to external databases, which makes it even better, because then this is what makes it possible to go on the internet and have applications that can interact or be used or called through the internet. But these are very advanced solutions. I've told people who have talked to me about this that quite often in the Nigerian market space, I've not really seen clients that can believe or invest at that level in this kind of Excel solutions, because they need to see that it's going to be necessary and beneficial to them, and quite often most of them are not operating at that level. So I have friends who are developers in places like Singapore, France, or at least acquaintances, not always friends, and also the USA, who do stuff like this. But I would say the level at which I have so far had to serve people and offer coaching has been at the Excel developer level, at the highest. All right, so that's it. If you have any questions, please let me know.